Hey everyone, welcome back to another video on the Project Return Online Classroom. This is Miss Madison, and today we're going to be going over painting with a gallon-sized Ziploc bag. If you don't have a gallon-sized one, you can also use a sandwich bag, but just keep in mind your painting is going to be a little bit smaller. You're also going to be needing paper. The tougher the paper, the better, and you're also going to be needing paint. I'm going to be showing you how you can use acrylic and watercolor, so whichever one you have, we're going to be making it work. And then we're also going to be going over different ways that we can embellish it. Ways that we can use tape, pens, Sharpies, extra paint, whatever we have, to then add on to it after we're done if we want, or we can just keep it the same. This is really going to be something that you guys can play around with depending on what you have, what you want to create, and what's going to be the best for you and what you want to make right now. I hope you guys have a lot of fun with this, and let's get started. So here are all of the supplies that I am using. I find that using tube paint in any sort of way, whether it is watercolor or it is acrylic, is a lot easier, but we're still going to try and make it work even with a pan. I used more of my pan watercolor to just kind of highlight a background area that I wanted, but you really can build up a lot more color and a lot more water to get the same effect. I'm also just using a simple brush for my pan, some tape, and a little bit of water for my watercolors as well. For my acrylic one to start off with, what I'm going to do is tape off some certain areas to give it something a little bit more fun, a little bit more dynamic to look at before I start putting the paint on. I am using drafting tape so it will not pull up any part of my paper. If you're using just regular tape, stick it to your clothes a few times, just kind of stick it on and off, and that'll get rid of some of that stickiness. Now when I'm putting my paint down, I'm making sure to put pretty big amounts, pretty big globs down. You can even put a little bit more than what I put before I put it in the bag. And as I'm putting my paper in the bag, I'm trying to be mindful not to smear it too much along the top. It's going to get all smeared together anyways, but I was just trying to be aware of where I wanted my yellow to be. And then that's when you just start mixing it all together. Using colors that are similar to each other, like warm colors, colors that are going to mix well, is a very smart choice to make. That way it doesn't get too muddy too quickly. By using my red and my yellow, I'm able to create an orange much more naturally, and I can start to squeeze the paint and really start to mix it all together without, worrying about if it's going to look good or not. You can also use other things from your kitchen. I opened up my bag and added a little bit more paint and moved it around with a spoon, with a spatula. You can use a rolling pin. You can really, like I said, customize it to what you have left in your house. Now when I'm pulling it out of the bag, I don't want it to drag too much, so I'm trying to unstick some of my bag from the paper as I'm slowly making my way sliding it out so that it doesn't smear too much. It's still going to happen a little bit, and that's why I'm going to ball up my bag, make sure all that wet paint is still on the inside, ball it up, and I'm going to mix it up a little bit more just to give it that texture, that mixed up texture that I like. My yellow got a little bit lost in it, so I'm going to add a little bit more yellow afterwards and really build that up as well. So as my acrylic paint is drying and I am going to clean out some new water, we're going to start on our watercolor one. Unfortunately, I thought I was recording, but I guess I wasn't when I did the beginning part, but it was all very similar. I built up a lot of my pan watercolor and then added, in addition, my tube watercolor on top. Before I put my paper in my bag, I'm going to put a little bit of my water in there first. I don't want to put so much that the paper is going to be so soaking wet that it's going to disintegrate or it's going to ruin the integrity of it at all. So I'm going to slide it in there, and then I'm just going to start moving around very similar and to activate all of that watercolor. It's a lot of fun getting it to move up together. When you start to see when we mix that blue and that yellow, how it starts to get that green color. When I said that colors can start to get murky if we don't choose light colors, that's a little bit of an example of what it can look like. So then I'm going to open it up and I'm going to let it sit for just a little bit, because a lot of what creates the texture with the watercolor is what gets left from the bag. I let it sit for a little bit before I took my hairdryer to it. If you have a whole day to let it sit, that would be a good thing to do too. Because I had, obviously do it all in one day and I had a hairdryer, I sped up the process a little bit. But you can start to see how a lot of the cracks start to come through, how it dries in a really interesting way with a lot of those textures, and that's what I love about it. Now you can start to see how we can add even more things to it as well, using Sharpies, using pens. We can add line, we can make it look like a galaxy. We can do all sorts of things to embellish and add on to our watercolor painting. And now that my acrylic paint is all dry, I can start peeling off the tape, and this is probably one of the most satisfying parts of this whole process. It's one of my favorites and I love it. It just makes everything look a lot more clean, and that design that you first came up with starts to pop out a lot more. Once again, I'm going in with a pen or a Sharpie. Luckily, I had some of similar colors that I wanted to use, and this was a really fun way of just adding line, adding something a little bit more detailed to it that I could just kind of zone out and draw. If you have paint, you can go back over and add dots. If you want your blue and your purple, your cool colored painting to look like a galaxy, you can add stars into it. You can take a regular pen and you can draw a cityscape. You can draw anything that you want, anything around you. There's so many different possibilities that you can then add on top of this if you want to. And like I said in the beginning, you can even keep it blank. It's really up to you. I hope you guys had a lot of fun with this. I hope the end result is something that you are happy with and that you guys have a wonderful week ahead of you. I miss you and I'm very grateful for you guys. All right, bye.